So, kia ora koutou. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to our very first hosted webinar on the foundations of nutritional wellness. My name is Lucy Keble and I'm the Head of Communications for Common Sense. You may know that Common Sense has 5 stores across Wellington and Auckland, retailing organic food and environmentally aware household goods. Our stated purpose is to connect customers with shopping they can trust in order to create a kinder and more ethical future for us all. We set about this by sourcing goods with a commitment to organic agriculture, fair trade, and environmental sustainability. Our speaker tonight is Storm Sommerville. Storm is a registered naturopath, nutritionist, and herbalist, and has worked in the natural health and wellness industry for nearly 10 years. For 8 of those years, she has also been working as a health consultant with us at Common Sense, primarily in our Kilburnie store. Storm is a passionate advocate for high-quality organic food and has a strong foundation in evidence-based medicine. She spends her spare time reading and researching the latest clinical information relating to integrative medicine. Storm uses her extensive knowledge not only to the advantage of her clients and customers, but as a mother of 2, also for her young family. And thanks to the wonders of modern technology, we are all able to share in this knowledge tonight. So even though we can't hear or see you out there, please join me in sending warm, welcoming vibes as I now hand you over to Storm.
Hi there, thanks Lucy for that amazing welcome. I hope everybody can hear us loud and clear tonight. Just a couple of things. So tonight's format, we're going to go through some slides and we're going to talk about nutrition, health and our genes and how we can affect our genes using foods and the environment we place our body in. So I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes and then we'll do some Q&A. So if you could hold your questions till the end and then I'll answer them to the best of my knowledge. We have an amazing giveaway prize from Common Sense, which is an awesome hamper. So if you wanted to enter for that, put your name and surname and your email and which store you'll be collecting in, and you can go in the draw to win that. Yeah, and there's a survey at the end and we'd love you to fill that in when we are finished. So I am now going to screen share with you and we'll get started. Right. So welcome to Foundations of Nutritional Wellness. With me, as Lucy said, I'm a naturopath, I'm a herbalist and a nutritionist, and I love food as medicine. I'm also a mum of 2 really busy boys, so I'm quite aware that the environment can sometimes be really busy. So I'm always looking to improve my environment. So when we talk about wellness, we look at Te Wharepapa Whā, and today we're going to be talking about the physical wellness. It's really important that we look at all areas of this wellness because, you know, we can't just concentrate on the one. We have to look at spiritual wellness, our mental and emotional wellness, as well as family and social, because they all contribute to our well-being. But for today's talk, we're just going to be talking about the physical pillars of health. Don't get a shock, methylation. We used to call methylation metabolism, but I'm not going to get too deep into this. It's quite an incredible process. And this is the process where we can affect the expression of our genes. So it's a chemical process in the body, and it's the transfer of 1 carbon methyl group and 3 hydrogen atoms. Now, I hope I haven't lost you. This isn't just about as deep as we're going to go, but I want you to know that this process activates or deactivates molecules, which is our DNA, these molecules. And it's like process of cogs in a wheel. This is the methylation process. Don't run away yet. It's really exciting. And we're not going to be talking about this. I just wanted to show you a couple of these little, you see these little ones in the colors? Those are your genes. So here is a big one, a really well-known one called your MTHFR, or your 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. There's your COMT, which is another really important one. I'm not going to go too deep into these, and your VDR, but as you see, this cycle is kind of, it's like our metabolism cycle, and it all links up and works together. And this is what it's like. These are the cogs in the wheel, and I really like this picture here. And this is how we methylate our nutrients. I just want to point out something, that folic acid, if I could cross that out, I got this picture of a recent webinar, and I'd rather have that as calcium folinate or folinate, because folic acid is a chemical that is man-made, and I'd rather get our folic acid from food sources. So as you can see, the food comes into the body, where's that? And our body breaks it down piece by piece. And you see they make these methyl groups, and that transcribes into our DNA. So when our methylation is working well in our body, it impacts every single process. So it impacts our DNA production, our neurotransmitters, it impacts our mental health, it helps our detoxification pathway, so the toxic burden we have in our body. We express different histamine functions, so if we're methylating well, we have low allergies and intolerances. It also impacts our estrogen metabolism, our fat metabolism, and cellular health and energy. So what are the nutrients that we need to regulate the cycle? Well, we need B2, B6, B12, magnesium, betaine, vitamin D, and choline. And as you can see on the little picture here, is the dietary sources of these nutrients. We've got the betaine and the choline. And then we've got the folate, and you see these are coming from the diet and entering into the cycle. And then we get a very exciting word called a SNP, or a polymorphism. And that's a single nucleotide polymorphism. So we inherit genes from our parents. So we get a heterozygous or homozygous genes, which means we either inherit one gene from my mom and one gene from my dad that's the same, or one from my mom and one from my dad is different. And depending on what we inherit is dependent on what kind of SNPs we'll have, if at all. And these are also what makes us different. You know, it's what makes me have blonde hair, a little bit brown. You've got brown eyes. You know, it's what makes us different. And a really common example of a SNP that's been really well researched in recent years is your MTHFR gene, or your C677T. And we know a lot about this gene now, and how this gene converts dietary folate into its active form. And if we've got a SNP in this, it may possibly lead to things like neural tube defects, psychiatric disorders, cancers, a predisposition to autoimmune issues, autism, ADHD, CVD, anxiety, and depression. And if you just go into PubMed or Google Scholar and you typed in MTHFR and any condition, you would see that coming up with a heap of research. So some of the common SNPs, the more well-researched ones, the ones that we've really got to know in recent years, are your MTHFR, and that's your methylation master. That's the one that breaks down the folate from our diet. Then we also have the COMT gene, and this gene is detoxing our neurotransmitters. It helps with focus, calm, and stress. So if we had a SNP in our COMT, we definitely want to stay away from caffeine, and we definitely want to lean towards high magnesium foods. Those of us who are experiencing seasonal allergies and oversensitive sensitivities to food would have perhaps a DAO SNP. Then we have our MAO gene SNP, and that's related to mood swings, carb cravings, anxiety, depression. And although these are negative, it also is the warrior gene. So people with these SNPs back in prehistoric times, we would have been the ones that would have gone out and fought and hunted, because it makes us, you know, really tough and strong. But if we don't use all those neurotransmitters, you know, that'll lead to possibly anxiety and depression. Then we've got our GST, or our GPX gene, and this is a really interesting gene. If we're having high amounts of toxins through food, this gene will neutralize it, and GST stands for glutathione S-transferase. So this is something that adds on a glutathione to toxins to neutralize it. So we really want that gene working well. And it's quite useful to know how that gene works for us, because some people are more sensitive to chemicals than others. We've got our NOS3, our PMT, and then I added another one after I did this talk at the Go Green Expo, the ApoE, which is about cholesterol and fat metabolism, because I've been learning a lot about this gene and its relation to Alzheimer's and fat metabolism. You know, cholesterol, heart disease is really big in the world. And sometimes we think we're doing everything right, and yet still we've got a high cholesterol, and it could be because we have the ApoE gene. The wonderful thing, although we may have SNPs in our genes, or in all these important genes, it doesn't matter if we have those SNPs, because it's about the environment that we create for our bodies that will allow for those genes to express or not express. So it depends, you know, our level of stress, our toxic burden, screen time, pollution, the foods we put into our body. That's going to make a difference on how our genes express, and whether we're going to have issues with glucose and blood sugar, whether those genes are going to express into those CVD risks, those you know, diabetic predispositions. Talking about the environment, it's really useful to talk about a couple of these toxins that we're putting, you know, that we're putting into our body, or we're subject to, depending on the kind of lifestyles we live. And we know, you know, if we go and sit in exhaust fumes, that's not great for us. You know, using excess fluoride, lead, BPAs, and all those toxic chemicals that can be put on our food these days. Dioxins. So these are PCDTs. These are some of the ingredients in pesticides and herbicides. And these toxins are stored in our fat cells, and they are classified as carcinogenic. So these are really dangerous. You know, if we have accumulating number of these dioxins in our system, and we have, say, a GPX SNP, we're not going to be able to detoxify these dioxins as well as somebody who doesn't have a SNP on these, and if that gene hasn't been expressed. So long-term exposure to these pesticides and herbicides will lead to nerve damage, immune system disruption, endocrine abnormalities, reproductive impairment. And those of us who are most sensitive to these pesticides and herbicides are our unborn fetus. And I came across a really good study that talks about that, which is in the slide at the bottom there if you're interested in researching that further. Another little note is just the things we're putting onto our body. You know, I'm very prone to a face mask. I did my Taylor face mask before this. I enjoy a bit of makeup and luxury, but I'm quite aware that a lot of products have high amounts of toxins in them, and they are not regulated. And these toxins will go in and they will disrupt how our bodies function. So they will actually interfere with our endocrine system, and they will disrupt a natural process of the body. And they will cause things like thyroid dysfunction, hormone dysfunction. They will mess with those reproductive hormones, and they can be really estrogenic because they actually go in and they bind to those estrogen receptors and they disrupt that whole pathway. So we would just want to be really mindful of the products we're putting onto our bodies. I came across this study and I thought I'd feature it because it just shows how our environments really do affect how we express genes. This study was showing congenital heart disease and birth defects, and how being in a highly toxic environment caused that folate SNP to become activated, and that led to birth defects. So you're kind of thinking, where do I start? She's just overloaded me with all this genetic information, and everything I look at is toxic. What do I do? So what we want to do is we want to lessen the burden on our bodies. We want to take out things that can be quite stressful to the body at times, and we want to just allow our body to have this optimum function. So some of the things I can do, or you can do, and we can do, is minimize processed dairy. I mean, Fonterra is doing really well, and that's great, but we really want to lead to good organic A2 quality dairy. We want to reduce our exposure to toxins through our body, our homes, our lifestyle. If you can tolerate gluten, great. To be fair, I don't meet a lot of people who can tolerate it very well. We know we need to reduce sugar and deep fried foods and alcohol and high amounts of fat. And we want to minimize these, as I said, because we want to put in other foods and make space for other foods so that our body can thrive. When I was just evaluating these slides before, I was thinking about how I can explain water and the qualities of water. And, you know, we're 80% water in our bodies. Our brain is hugely water rich. So we want to include some really good, fresh, clean water. And I've popped some water filters on there because most water that is available through our taps is not that great. And I came across something on the Ministry of Health's website about our drinking water in New Zealand. And they state that although the risk is small, the Ministry of Health recommends that you flush a minimum of a cupful of water from your tap each morning to remove any metals that may have dissolved from the plumbing fittings. You should do this whether or not you are on private or public water supply. If you are a landlord, make sure that your tenants are aware of this advice. I wasn't aware of that advice. My partner wasn't aware of that advice, and he's a landlord. And you just got to start asking these kind of questions about why they want you to flush these, you know, flush your water system from these toxins, and what's happening if these are accumulating in your body. So I went about on a bit of a wormhole trying to discover what was actually in our water in New Zealand, and we have lead, nickel, cadmium, copper, antimony, chlorine, and fluoride as a minimum. And it's about the accumulated exposure. So if you've already got high aluminium exposure, you're not really wanting more aluminium from your water. Some people have concerns with excess fluoride consumption, and the other one is chlorine. And yes, it is beneficial that we decontaminate water, but at the same time, that chlorine in the water we drink is really going to affect our microbiome because it's put in there to kill bugs, and we really don't want to kill our good bacteria in our gut. And I'll talk a little bit about this further down the line. So a very, very exciting area for me is nutrigenomics. And this is the effect of nutrients on the expression of an individual's makeup. This is how the food we eat affects our gene expression. So by consuming certain foods, we have the ability to switch on or switch off certain genes. And this is really exciting because you have the ability to control your gene expression. Again, talking about the kind of foods and we want to consume, we want to go as organic. Organic is beautiful. I am so passionate about organic food. I remember stepping off the plane 9 years ago and my mother-in-law took me down to Common Sense Organics in Kilburnie, and I walked in and I was like, this is where I want to be. The food is beautiful, fresh, you know, the people are wonderful, you know, avoiding pesticides and really bad fertilizers. This is where Common Sense started. You ask Jim, you know, one of the founders of Common Sense, and he was really, he is really passionate about growing organic seedlings and not using petrochemical, you know, fertilizers. And that's kind of where the dream of Common Sense was founded. And this is very special. You know, going organic is more than just the foods. It's about, you know, the way organic farming works, how they look after their animals. They have really high standards. So to get an organic certification, companies have to jump through huge hoops to get these. And they're, you know, they're looking further than right here, right now. They're looking for the well-being of our children and our children's children by farming organic. So it's protecting our countryside. It's, you know, they're contributing to a positive climate change. Most of the places are fair, well, actually probably all of them are fair employment. They avoid genetically modified foods, which is a hugely important thing. And the food tastes amazing. If you have tasted organic food, you will never go back. But I also understand that's not an option for everybody. So some of the places you could start was with the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, this is a list put out by the Environmental Working Group every year, and they test all the fruit and vegetables out there for the highest amount of pesticides and herbicides, and that's called the Dirty Dozen, which is over here. And then they also test for the least amount of pesticides and herbicides, and that's the Clean 15. So this is a really great place to start. You know, if you're thinking, oh, what are the highest kind of pesticide and herbicide foods? You could think strawberries, spinach, kale, apples, grapes. You know, you could just go for those 12 of the Dirty Dozen and avoid having those commercially and eating those organic. Whereas the Clean 15, they have less amounts of pesticides, so you could eat those more freely. The other awesome option is grow it yourself. There is nothing more rewarding than doing your own garden. And the benefit of that is you get some really primitive microbes in the soil. And these microbes benefit our body. So what can we include in our diets to be more healthful so that we have this positive gene expression, so we have health and energy and vitality? Broccoli sprouts. I put broccoli sprouts in everything. They are amazing. If we think turmeric is one of the highest antioxidants out there, you haven't met broccoli sprouts. These are incredible. They have something called sulforaphane in them, and this upregulates your phase 1 and 2 liver detoxification. And they are so rich in nutrients. So I am just smashing my broccoli sprouts every single day. They are amazing, and they taste really good too. The other thing we can do is eat lots of green vegetables. Our nanas always told us, eat your greens. I know my nan was a good, big fan of green vegetables, and there is a reason for this. green veggies are really high in folate. And that's what I was talking about earlier with regards to that NTHFR gene. And here it is. So green vegetables are really high in folate. So they enter the cycle over here, and they really influence how our genes can express. And we absolutely need this to kind of kick off that methylation cycle. And it's one of the most important genes in our body. So we really want to be having dark leafy greens as much as possible. Just a note is that I'd highly like to emphasize, please avoid folic acid. Folic acid is a man-made chemical. It's made in a laboratory, and there's a lot of research coming out now showing that it disrupts this pathway. It's not a food source, so it really does affect this cycle. Our body can't break it down, and that can actually have negative effects on the cycle. So awesome methylation foods here. And I'm going to start with one of my favorites, which is liver pate. And I can hear you out there going, oh, give me anything but liver pate. But really, it's fantastic. It is so rich in vitamin Bs, in folate and choline, and it's an absolute superfood. But if you absolutely can't do it, there are other options in there. So for our vegans and our vegetarians, a diet really rich in beans and legumes will be great. You're going to get your folate there and some vitamin B and magnesium. Your nuts and seeds, great option. Oily fish, you'll get your vitamin D and omega-3 in there. Beetroot for that betaine, which is part of that cycle, and upregulates choline, which is a super important nutrient. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about choline in the future. And eggs, which is another fantastic source of vitamin B and that choline. And I'm hearing you're going, oh, I'm a vegan, I don't do liver pate or eggs or fish. And that's totally fine. You can get your nutrients from soy. And another really cool place to get your choline is actually potato skins. But just be mindful that you need a lot more of this. So like a serving of liver pate or some liver, to get the equal amount of nutrients from soy, you'd probably need about 3 cups of that. So I encourage you to try and do like a nutrient challenge. Download a really good nutrient tracker app like MyFitnessPal and pop in your food for a couple of days and actually see if you can hit your RDIs for things like folate and choline and iron, actually, because that's really hard to do. You need a lot of choline. It was something like 450 micrograms as your RDI. And I know even though I'm a meat eater and an egg eater, I still struggle to hit that target. So, maybe supplementing with choline is for you, and maybe you're going to try and eat more nuts and legumes and soy. The other really cool thing, and I added the slide in, it's because I find this really exciting, is methylation adaptogenics. And these are pretty cool. These have the ability to regulate our methylation. So if we have the ability in our bodies to over-methylate or under-methylate. And we just want to be mindful that we have the ability to make these, this process go either way. But using things like turmeric and rosemary and berries, that's going to really help us regulate that methylation process without having any knock-on effects. You kind of call them a backdoor, support for that methylation cycle. They're pleiotropic, so they can be used in many different ways in the body. I thought it was quite beautiful, actually. My son went to a market at school today where the kids had made things to sell as a fundraiser. And he came home with some rosemary tea. And for me, and I actually cried. Like, that's really beautiful. So here, I said to him, you make me my rosemary tea, sweetheart, and I will drink it today during the presentations. Really, really touched by that. So, you know, including rosemary in your cooking is awesome. More turmeric. We've just got some awesome turmeric products in Common Sense called Konya. Some really beautiful bio-curcumin from South Africa, which is amazing. I know my mom's been taking that for years and swears by it. So it's in that a phospholipid form, and our body loves that and absorbs that really readily. And of course, berries. Oh, give me a smoothie any day. One of the other things which I feel is really a foundation to being healthy is having fermented foods. You know, tending to our gut is tending to methylation. It's tending to that massive support systems. And there's research coming out now showing how Lactobacillus plantarum, which is in these fermented foods, break down that folate and have the ability to regulate your folate cycle, your methylation cycles. We know fermented foods are rich in probiotics. They're high in enzymes. They make nutrients more bioavailable, which means we absorb them better. And they're really helpful for our digestion. Not everybody can tolerate fermented foods. So if you have issues with that, I would really insist you see a nutritionist or a naturopath, because you might have some histamine issues going on there. I came across this awesome study recently, which is a 2019 study showing the benefits of fermented foods and all those microorganisms in the fermented foods. There's a lot in there, you know, kefir, kombucha, which I've never been a huge fan of, but actually some of the research on those home cultures are coming back with quite a large variety of good bacteria. You've got the sauerkraut, tempeh, natto. There is actually prebiotics and probiotics in natto, although they didn't find any in this study. Kimchi and sourdough bread. And in the sourdough bread, I know they say there's no data available there, but there's usually a Saccharomyces in there, which is great. The other thing we want to do is include high fiber foods. And the reason we want to do that is because these really high fiber, insoluble and soluble fibers feed our microbiome. And our microbiome is what helps contribute to our environment of our body. I mean, that's really neat. And we have more gut bugs and, you know, probiotics in our body than we have human DNA. We've got more bug DNA than human DNA. So we want to feed these guys and we want to keep them happy. So, you know, no long-term keto diets, please. And we want a variety, you know, we want, you know, those apples in this picture here, that's really high in pectin. Pectin feeds that gut bacteria. You've got the flax seeds, the polyphenols from your berries, and then your more insoluble fibers there on the other side with your nuts and seeds and legumes. It's really important to eat, you know, those legumes and beans, and people have really stepped away from them in recent times, you know, tending more towards, you know, autoimmune paleo diets and keto, and those are useful, and FODMAP diets, they're useful tools, but we need to be mindful that we've got to feed these gut bacteria. We can't starve them. They're kind of controlling a huge amount of the environment that we're living in. So be good to them, feed them. Another really great area that I'm very fascinated in is prebiotics. So it's great to have probiotics. I use probiotics all the time in my clinic and at Common Sense, but we really want prebiotics because these are the foods, again, that our gut bacteria eat. So if you're thinking like, hey, I just can't do beans, you could have a look at something like inulin, but start really, really slow on prebiotics, please. Really slow. You know, I'll have clients and I'll be like, oh, what about having some green bananas? And I'll be like, no, So then we have another option. We could do some green banana flour, just a little bit. We've also got PHGG, which is a partially hydrolyzed guar gum, slippery elm, psyllium, Jerusalem artichokes, or some fartichokes. Oh, they're the best. I love them. Asparagus, it's asparagus season, and some green tea, and those polyphenols is what your gut bacteria love. I just wanted to, we're not going to go into it too much, but it's really, really important. It's not just about the food we consume and looking after those gut bugs, but we really need to do some regular exercise, not excessive exercise, moderate exercise. We need to avoid that excessive alcohol consumption. We need to definitely not be smoking or vaping, and avoid excess coffee consumption. So I originally started off with not more than 5 cups a day, and I realized that is way too much. If you could have 1 cup a day, of good quality organic coffee, fantastic, not more than 2. And actually, this would depend on that comp gene, because if you do have a SNP in that comp gene and you're having high amounts of caffeine, you won't be able to detox the caffeine. You'll be producing way too many catecholamines, and your body just doesn't have the ability to process that caffeine. So I want to end with the story of 2 mice. And this was a study done many years ago, and from a really awesome book. So if you're really interested in this area, I highly advise reading Dr. Ben Lynch's book. And he tells the story of 2 mice. And these mice were from the exact same strains, exactly the same genes. And when they were in their mummy's little tummies, they were given different things. So one mouse was given excellent methyl food groups. They were given a calm environment, adequate water, a great kind of lifestyle, but really they had all those methyl nutrients they needed. Whereas the other mouse, he was put in a very, the other mouse mommy, sorry, she was put in a very stressful environment and fed a very highly processed diet. And these 2 mummies had very different mice. The highly stressed mum with no nutrients, her babies all had the, were all obese. They all had cardiovascular disorders and high rates of cancer. Whereas the mummy mice who had those great methyl groups and healthy food, exercise, and a wonderful environment, her babies were born in perfect health. So, it's about that environment of the body, and what we put in is really, really what we're going to get out. Another favorite quote to end on is that genes load the gun, but environment pull the trigger. It really, really is about the environment we provide for our body and creating that right environment to optimize those genes' expression. Because your genes are not your destiny. Just because you are born with certain genes does not mean they have to be activated. And once they are activated, it can be quite tricky to turn them off. So I want to say thank you for joining me for the webinar tonight. If genes are something that interests you and you want to look at further, please, flick me an email. You can test your genes these days, and that's always a really cool option. And I'm just gonna open the floor up to any questions. I might just stop the share there and go and have a look at any. Does anyone have any Q&A? Remember to pop your your name, email, and which store you would like to collect your, if you win, which store you'd like to collect your prize from.
Storm, while people are thinking about questions, I had a question about the difference between prebiotics and probiotics. I didn't quite understand that distinction.
Okay, so probiotics, these are our gut bugs. So these are your lactobacillus, your akkermansia, your bifidobacteria, Bacteroides. So we have a number of bacteria that are in our gut. We also have, you know, those probiotics. So we can put more of those gut bugs into us by taking probiotics. And we also refer to the probiotics in our gut as a microbiome. So often we use that quite interchangeably, you know, your probiotics and your microbiome. Microbiome more refers to internal environment of our gut bugs. So we can take those probiotics. Prebiotics are the foods you can take to feed and nourish that microbiome. Does that help?
Right, yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh, I think we have a question. Oh, no, just some chat there. Well, if anyone, we'll just give it a few more minutes. Come on, I love a question. Hit me up with a question. Give it a few more minutes. And yeah, did you have anything else to add, Lucy?
There's somebody with their hand up, so I'm
Okay.
gonna, this is Gupri, I'm gonna allow her to be unmuted. There we go. Hi, Gupri, did you have a question?
Yes, just a quick one. Nice to see you both.
Oh, thank you.
How you, I noticed how you spoke about balancers, and you mentioned turmeric, and you mentioned few products there from the shop. Just with the benefit wise, is it, you know, that powder that I use, should I continue with that, or I should more use the fresh turmeric, or, you know, kind of capsules, or so just
great question. Really, really good question. I love to access my nutrients when I'm working with people via food. I really like that as an option, but sometimes you need really high amounts of those to, you know, kind of flip that switch. So if I had somebody who was highly, you know, for example, there's a lot of study with turmeric and pain, you know, as an analgesic or an anti-inflammatory. So if I had somebody coming in who had severe joint pain, I would say then go for a supplement option, because in these kind of acute episodes or really chronic episodes, you need higher amounts of the constituents inside the turmeric. So you may have heard turmeric being referred to as curcumin, and that's the constituent inside the turmeric that elicits that anti-inflammatory response. So if you would, you know, just kind of everyday health, I would say pop that turmeric in as many things as possible. Make sure you're cooking or using it with a fat or pepper, because you'll absorb it better. But if you're wanting a more therapeutic result, I would say then go for a supplement.
Right. Yep. That's great.
Awesome. Cool.
I've got one question come through on the chat. Can you explain the different fats, please? And actually, I think she's got her hand up as well, so I'll just let her talk. Are you there? Is that Disney?
Stormy?
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, fine. Can you know, with all these, as you said about the paleo diet and the keto diet, they're always saying that you must have a lot of fat. Okay, the sugar's out. I know that avocados are good fats, and coconut oil and things like that. But you know, the bad fats, are they talking about just fried foods, or what fats should we be encouraged to have? Because I don't think we have enough. You know, being old-fashioned, we were always saying, oh, the fats are bad. So, you know, it's hard to get used to eating the fat.
Yeah. Good question. So I'm going to look at what the research says.
Okay.
The research says high amounts of saturated fat are not ideal for the diet. And if we look at traditional diets, they are not excessively. I'm just going to mute you. I can hear some. Lucy, could you maybe
Yes,
mute
I will.
Daisy? So if we look at traditional diets, so quite a controversial option is coconut oil. And I've always kind of been on the fence about coconut oil. I will use it. I think it's great, but I will use it in moderation. It is highly, highly saturated. And when you look at the keto diets, they want you to have it in a liquid form, and it's more, it's in a more polyunsaturated, monounsaturated form. So it's not in a fully highly saturated form. It's quite a hard question to answer in a short amount of time about the different types of fats. If I had to kind of give a short answer, I'd say mix and match and avoid excessive highly saturated fats, especially in a Western diet setting. So if you were consuming lots of fried foods, hydrogenated fats, kind of denatured fats, I'd say, look, you really need to moderate your saturated fat intake, even from coconut oil. But if you're eating a very Mediterranean diet, quite a plant-based diet, lower in animal fats, I'll say, yeah, coconut oil is good, you know, go for it. At the end of the day, it's person specific. Some people are okay with fats. I think, you know, the research that I was reading a couple of days ago did have to do with that ApoE gene and how we have the ability to break down those fats, and whether, you know, that gene is activated or not, you know, will affect how well we can break down that gene. Yeah, does that kind of answer that? I mean, it's quite a big question about the different fats. But I would say, you know, do what's best for your diet. If you're having, you know, bulletproof coffees with, you know, those medium chain triglycerides from your, you know, keto oils, and you're getting a negative effect, like it's making you run to the bathroom every 5 minutes, I'd say that's not for you. You know, let's have a look at something that would work for you. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
Great. All right. Here we go. One more question. Can you see that one, Storm?
Yep, yep, being out of balance, and are we planning on doing webinars on other areas? Well, yes, I hope we will. I went to the most incredible training yesterday, which I would recommend for everybody, which is your mental health first responders course, and that kind of got me thinking about that area, and how we can really nourish our mental health, and kind of foods we could take and things we could do to balance that. So maybe that's something that'll happen, you know. We'll see. Give your feedback. Put that in the feedback form.
Yeah, so hopefully the feedback will be sent to you. We're not quite sure how this Zoom process works, but we're figuring it out. That seems to bring us to the end of the questions, and I would just like to say thank you very much to Storm for sharing all her information with us, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. It's been a real privilege. Thank you so much, and don't forget to pop your emails in and which store you'd like to collect your prize if you win from. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.